Yeah, so today we're addressing the number one question I get asked for people who are making progress but cannot fully get free of their addiction. And that is how to prevent a relapse. So we're going to go into all things, what needs to be done when you are making progress to keep the progress going. And honestly, if you can master what we're going to discuss today, it literally could be the difference between you incrementally improving versus exponentially recovering and having your last relapse very soon. Yeah, so I'm gonna give you guys 5 specific techniques that I found to be really, really effective. I know this from my own personal story, but I mean, we've helped so many people quit their addictions now, thousands. And these 5 things go a really long way when you're in sort of those in between spaces, trying to push things forward to that place of full freedom. Yeah, so let's start by talking about what is a relapse. Relapse is basically when you have some degree of progress where you are not engaging in the behavior. So we'd call that sobriety. And a relapse is when you don't just engage in it a little bit, but you basically go full on again. So it's helpful sometimes to make a distinction between a slip and a relapse. So if we're talking about alcohol, and maybe your addiction is to alcohol, and so you're saying, you know what, I'm quitting, and you've gone a couple weeks now without a drink, and you go out with some friends and you have 2 drinks. That's a slip. Okay, you didn't get hammered and go way off the deep end, but you slipped because you're not supposed to be drinking at all. But if you go out and you go on a bender and you can't remember the last 3 days because you were blackout drunk, you had a relapse. So we're specifically talking about relapses, but it's the same for slips. We're trying to prevent any sort of engagement in the behavior or the substance that we are avoiding, that we're trying to get free of. So that's what a relapse is. And I think the reason that that this is so hard is you can muster up enough willpower to go without anything for a couple days, maybe a couple of weeks. But the reason that relapses are very common when people are recovering is they don't know what to do in those in-between spaces. They know something to get the ball rolling, and then they just do more of it. So it's like, I'm going to quit cocaine cold turkey, which you do have to quit cocaine cold turkey. But then they don't have a course of action of how they're going to do it, and what are they going to do when the cravings come back, and what happens if they have a weak moment? Is there someone they can call? Like, they don't think through everything that comes with it. And as a result, they end up relapsing and slipping again. So what happens is not only do you relapse where it's like, too bad, I was going a month without it, now I slipped again. What happens is you lose all that momentum. It takes so much energy and time and effort just to get to a couple days, a couple weeks, definitely a couple months. And when you relapse, you don't lose all of it necessarily, but you lose a lot of it. You can't just pick back up where you started. And so it's really important that we are intentional about preventing relapses, not just because relapses suck and we lose our streak and we feel bad, but actually so that we can keep the momentum going and get that compounding effect that happens in recovery if we stick with it long enough. Yeah, I mean, in porn addiction, relapses are very prevalent. It's very common because porn is so addictive. And most people don't realize the kind of giant that they're up against when they're trying to quit pornography. So they just think an internet filter, some willpower, whatever. And then, yeah, they relapse all the time because they weren't prepared for it. It's like going into a battle without putting your armor on. They don't have the weapons, they don't have the protection, and they end up getting destroyed as a result. So yeah, very, very common. Yeah. They thought they were showing up for dinner and they didn't realize they got invited to a war. The first technique is confess temptations before you confess mistakes. So I actually learned this one from a personal experience, if you guys don't mind me sharing. I was dating, I was actually engaged to my wife, and I had been clean of porn for about 2 years. Okay. And I had this really stressful day at work. And it had been a long time since I had cravings like this, but my old responses were coming back. I've been clean for a while. I'm super stressed and my body wants to watch pornography. Now I'm at work and I knew better, but I was kind of making the plan. I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch. And, I was going down the path a little bit. 2 years of freedom on the line here. And it's date night. So actually that plan wasn't going to work either because I'm going to be with my wife right after, she's my fiance at the time. So anyways, I go and I pick her up, and my fiance and I had boundaries about our engagement. And the main boundary being no sex before marriage. So we were being really intentional with where we spent time together and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm realizing, okay, I'm not going to go watch pornography, but this boundary is at risk because my urges are at an all-time high. Something's got to give here, and my wife and I are going to be alone in our apartment for the evening. So I pick her up, and we're pulling into the driveway, and literally, like, I don't even remember what we talked about that day in the car ride. It was like 25 minutes, because all the while I'm just thinking, like, what am I going to do? Am I about to ruin our engagement? Am I about to ruin 2 years of freedom? You know, like, my head's just going to these places. And right as she gets out of the car, I'm like, oh, this is the whole reason I got free in the first place. I started to tell the truth. And so right as she got out, I was like, hey, babe, I just need to tell you something. So she gets back in. I say, hey, I've had a really tough day. I felt tempted to watch porn the entire time. And I'm really nervous that we're going to go in there and that I'm going to push our boundaries and we're going to do something that we're going to regret. And she had a big smile on her face and she said, hey, thanks so much for telling me. I'm going to pick up the slack tonight. And poof, just like that, like the urge is dissipated. Just because I got it out in the open, I confessed the temptation instead of waiting until it became something worse and then I have to like come back, you know, all groveling and solemn because I made a mistake. And so I just learned in that moment, I would rather confess a temptation than confess a mistake. That was a way better experience. Our relationship got stronger as a result, and I prevented what could have been a really devastating relapse in the process, not just for me and my 2 years of freedom at the time, but for my wife as well. So just learn to be transparent, learn to tell the truth early and often, and the sooner you can do it, the better off you are, the less likely you are for things to go deeper and darker down that path. Yeah, the second thing you want to do is have a trigger plan, and this is all about preparation. So what most people do is they say, I'm going to quit the drug, or I'm going to quit the behavior. I'm going to quit video games. And then they have no plan for the next time they feel tempted to watch video games. So let's say you have a guy, he plays video games every day after work. So he gets home from work and he just naturally turns his Xbox on. So he can't get rid of his Xbox because he's not the only person in the house and other people play Xbox. But he has made a decision, I'm not playing video games anymore. So what is he going to do the next time he comes home from work? That's his trigger plan, because he already knows that every single time he gets home from work, he has the thought to play video games, right? So a trigger plan is just being intentional before things happen. So what most guys do is they get home and then they're like, oh shoot, I feel tempted. Okay, I'm going to go make some food, or I'm going to go watch a movie instead. And because it's not premeditated, number one, it takes way more energy. And number two, the solution is probably less effective because they're just coming up with it in the moment. So what we want to do is we want to identify, okay, what is it that I'm actually feeling in those moments? What do I really need when I feel triggered? And what's going to be a better solution to mitigate that trigger? So for me, when I was quitting pornography, well, usually I felt tempted when I was really stressed or when I felt alone. So I need to have a plan. Like, okay, when I feel alone, I'm going to reach out to someone within 5 minutes and text them and see if they want to hang out. So I can't guarantee they're going to hang out with me, but I've already channeled my resources in a different direction, right? Or if it was stress, it was like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to listen to some music. And I would have a couple songs that were kind of just ready. They were in a playlist for me to go. Because when you're in the heat of those moments, you want it to be as easy as possible for you to not relapse, to not slip. So have a trigger plan and start with the basics. What are things that refresh you? What are things that relax you? What are things that energize you? Find things that meet those criteria and make that part of your trigger plan. It doesn't have to be complicated. And if you want bonus points, you can actually have 2 trigger plans. Okay, you can have one trigger plan for what you're going to do in the moment and another trigger plan for what you're going to do when you have a bit more time. So for me, that looked like, okay, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to listen to a song, and I'm going to maybe meditate on some scripture. So that's what I'm going to do in the moment. That's a great trigger plan. But when I have a bit more time, I'm going to sit down and journal, or I'm going to talk to one of my trusted friends or one of my trusted mentors who's guiding me through this process. So 2 different trigger plans, and it's actually the best if you have both. So it's like, this is what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to do this later. I'm going to journal about it. I'm going to talk to my friend. That kind of journal plan, you have no idea how many relapses you will save and how much momentum you will gain having a trigger plan that's well established and that works for you. That's the most important part, is it can't just be, this sounds good, this makes sense, this is logical. It has to be what specifically works for you. So give yourself permission to have a bit of trial and error, but start trying and start figuring out what works. Number 3 is safeguard your environment. Now, this one is very, very important, and honestly, it's low-hanging fruit. So let's go back to the Xbox example, right? Guy comes home from work. He's not playing video games anymore, but the Xbox is still in his house because there's other people who want to play Xbox. So if I were that person, I would be negotiating with those people and saying, can we put the Xbox somewhere else? Can we put it in your room? Can we put it away? And when you guys want it, you can pull it out. I would start to negotiate because the environment has to be as conducive as possible to my freedom. And if it's not, I'm stacking the odds against myself. So if you struggle with pornography and most of your relapses happen at night, stop charging your phone in your bedroom. Control your environment, protect your environment at all costs. And so you want to eliminate the triggers, and you want to not just eliminate the triggers. Okay, that's the obvious part. So move the Xbox, or don't go to the bar with your friends if you're trying to quit alcohol. That stuff's all easy. But what we actually want to do after we eliminate and kind of clean up the environment is we then want to set up our high contact areas for success. Okay, so for example, if you watch a lot of pornography and you watch it on your phone, what can you put as your phone wallpaper that's going to remind you of the things that you're after in your pursuit of freedom? Right? So we don't just want to say, okay, I'm going to safeguard my environment. We want to set our environment up to encourage our success. And that might mean that you are the weird guy who's got sticky notes on his bathroom. I was that guy, because that's just what I had to do. And so what? I had to do it for a year, and now I'm enjoying years of freedom and a completely different quality of life. It might mean that you have to drop some friends, because maybe your friends are only down for a good time if you're getting drunk together, or they're only your friends because you sell them drugs. So look, if that's the case, then you're going to have to ditch those friends, because as long as you're in those environments, you're just not a strong enough person. I wish there was another way to say it. One day you will be. I pray that one day you get to that place where you can go back into that environment and make a good decision. That's the marker of real freedom, but you're not there right now. While you're safeguarding your progress, safeguarding the momentum, safeguard your environment, and make sure that at all times, as much as is humanly possible, you are in a place that's conducive to your freedom. So the fourth thing is nervous system regulation. Okay, now if you were to break down any relapse in the history of time, somewhere in the chain of events, there's a dysregulation of the nervous system. What do I mean by that? When your nervous system is healthy and stable, the biological term would be homeostatic, or it's in homeostasis. Your heart is relaxed and there's no fight or flight. There's no sense of threat. Your defenses are down, you're focused, you're in the moment. Anytime somebody relapses, something dysregulated them. They got triggered, they got stressed out, they had a fight, they felt disconnected, uncomfortable, awkward. Something threw them off, and it threw them into this fight or flight mechanism that is deeply embedded into our physiology. We cannot escape it as much as we would love to. So instead, what we have to do is we have to learn to manage it. So what I mean by that is when you catch yourself in fight or flight, like, oh wow, okay, my heart's picked up, my chest feels tight, my legs are tense. I'm literally, to use personal examples, that's what my body does when I'm in that kind of fight or flight mode. I need to know how to get myself out of it. Okay, so for me, there's three things. Now, the first two things anyone can do. The third thing is specific to me. I've just learned this about myself. Okay, the first thing and the best thing you can do is take in a deep breath. Now, not a deep breath like, okay, that's a chest breath, but it's not really a deep breath. A deep breath where your shoulders are relaxed, and as you inhale, your belly should start to come out, okay, like filling a balloon. All right, now I would do 5 of those breaths. And by the 5th breath, you're going to feel everything start to relax. Now, neurologically, what this is actually doing is it's engaging your prefrontal cortex. Okay, when you have a fight or flight response, that's happening back here. And this part, everything that comes in from your body has to filter through this part first. Okay, so that's why you feel it in your body, because this thing is sending all these signals like alert, alert. And we lose circulation to this part of our brain because this part starts to take over. So to regulate, we breathe. Breathing re-engages this part. It helps us make good decisions, and it allows us to stay relaxed. Okay, it gets the circulation back where it needs to go. The second thing that you can do is move your body, or if you find that you're like moving really rapidly because you're triggered, is to still your body. Okay, so there's a bit of nuance here. You have to know what your response is. Personally, for me, I get hyperactive when I'm triggered. So I actually need to still my body, but I'm in a smaller percentage. Most people, what they need to do is they need to actually they need to get moving because they've frozen. They're slowing down. So moving, again, it's a good way to get circulation going, and it kind of re-energizes your perspective. Now, the third thing, and this can work for you as well, it's really effective for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but that is stretching your extremities. Okay, now a more meditative concept would be body scanning, and just making yourself aware of the top of your head, the tip of your toes, the tips of your fingers. Something about that is really regulating, because our body starts to become, or our brain rather, starts to become aware of our body again. You know, when you're triggered and that sort of thing, you're kind of outside of your body. And this gets us back in our body again so we can focus, we can concentrate, we can make a good decision. So if honestly, learning to regulate your nervous system, it's a great life skill. It's going to make you a better leader, better husband, father, and it's definitely going to help you stay on course in your recovery. Yeah, number 5 is bounce back and don't be too critical. So what I mean by this is specifically, we want to bounce back quickly. So you have some sort of pattern that you've established when you relapse. It's probably a bad pattern. It's probably like, oh, Sathya, you're so stupid. Why did you do that? What's the matter with you? You're never going to successfully recover. This is hopeless. You know, we have all these things, or we'll go cope with another addiction. So we'll go binge eat some ice cream, right? To kind of medicate the feelings, or we'll go out and we'll get ourselves drunk, or whatever it is. So if we have a kind of plan for how to bounce back quickly, it can go a long way to a relapse being just a little dip instead of a nosedive. Let me give you an example. Okay, when I was in the last little bit of my recovery, probably the last 6 months, I had a really bad binge. All right, so I had been clean for, it's probably 4 or 5 months, and I feel like I'm making progress, and then I'm home alone, I have kind of a weak moment, and I relapse. And I had learned at this point a thing that we teach our clients, all of our clients learn this, it's called mirror therapy, okay? The premise of mirror therapy is that you stand in front of a mirror, you look yourself in the eyes, and you speak the truth straight into your eyes. Super awkward, super uncomfortable, but it does 2 things. Number 1 is it forces me to deal with the shame right in the moment, because I have to look myself in the eyes, and that's very hard to do when you've done something that you're ashamed of. So it's very powerful. Okay, but the second thing it does, the scriptures say that the eyes are the windows of the soul. And so I'm literally speaking to my soul when I look at myself in the eyes, and I'm implanting the truth at a time when it's easy to fall prey to the lies. I'm a failure. I'm hopeless. This is a waste of time. I'm never going to recover. And it feels like you're faking it. It feels like I don't believe that, but you say it again and again, and you look yourself in the eyes, and eventually that truth starts to resonate. And what happens as a result is your thoughts start to get curbed. And so you start to think about, okay, well, how do I learn from this? And what am I going to do next time that's different? And, I had a hard relapse, but that's my first in 6 months. So technically, I've only slipped once in the last 6 months. That's actually amazing. You start to get all this perspective as you begin to speak the truth into your soul. So this is, honestly, this is like one of our greatest hacks. And it might look different for you, but finding out how you're going to bounce back quickly and really curbing those thoughts, curbing the emotions, mission critical. Because when I do that, now it just means I had a bump in the road, I'm back up, I'm moving forward again, full speed ahead. But if I kind of go down my old path with those old habits I've formed, I'm going to start back at square one, and it's going to be so much work to get all the momentum. So those are the best ways to bounce back quickly. And I would say the more intentional you are about this, the more safeguarded and protected you're going to be if you do relapse. Hopefully you never do, but if you do, at least you know how to keep the momentum going. If you have any other questions, remember I'm on Instagram, guys. You can always message me there. I'd be happy to help and answer any questions you have.